Where's Jared? I don't see him. Where could he be? I'm right here. Hey guys, I just went and saw Invisible Man, so let's talk about it. Invisible Man stars Elizabeth Moss, and she plays a girl who is running away from her controlling and abusive boyfriend, and once she is away, she finds herself being tormented by an invisible figure. This movie is a reboot or retelling of the classic novel, The Invisible Man. I don't really know much about that story. I haven't read it, so I can't really pull from my knowledge, my vast knowledge of The Invisible Man when I critique this movie. It's just based off of what I saw on the screen. Going into this movie, I was actually really excited for it. All the trailers I thought sold the concept really well, and it is a truly terrifying concept. The idea that there's an invisible man that could be in the room with you at the moment you don't know, watching you, stalking you, standing right behind you, possibly going to harm you at any moment you have no way of stopping or knowing when he's coming. That is a truly terrifying plot. And it honestly also circles around a lot of my fears when I was a kid and when I had nightmares. I always just had this scary thought of something coming that you couldn't stop, whether it was like standing too close to a rattlesnake, or I would have nightmares about Gollum from Lord of the Rings, or I would even have nightmares about Darth Sidious from Star Wars. But all these things, I just was super scared of something coming to hurt me that I couldn't stop or do anything to protect myself. And that's pretty much what the Invisible Man taps into. And that's why I was really excited for this movie. Now, after seeing Invisible Man, I think there are a lot of things that the movie does right, and some things that I thought that they could have done a lot better. Starting with the things that I liked, I thought that Elizabeth Moss's performance was pretty good. I thought that in many cases it was a little bit one-dimensional, not because of the performance that she gave, but just the kind of journey that her character was on. Pretty much straight from the beginning of this movie, she's in distress, and then she's depressed, and then she's in distress again at the end of the movie and all the way through it. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of different kind of directions that they had her character on. It just seems very one note, and it kind of falls into the category that the movie Midsummer did for me as well, where your main character is kind of just very depressed and sad. And I get why both of those characters are that way. I just think that it's a little bit harder to connect with as a member of the audience with that character. I am on their side. I don't want them to be hurt and I want them to be safe. But also when people are grieving, you feel for them, but you also know that that's kind of like their burden to bear. And when I'm watching a movie, it's kind of hard for me to latch on to characters like that. And that's not really a knock on Elizabeth Moss's performance. She did a good job. I just think that what they gave her was a little bit limited. I thought that they also captured a lot of frightening imagery really well in this movie. Like when she's walking away from the open flame burner, when she's cooking bacon in the kitchen, and as she walks away, you see that the burner gets turned up, so the bacon grease is kind of popping out into the fire, and it starts a little kitchen fire. That was disturbing. Or there's also a scene where she's sleeping and her phone or someone's phone is floating, taking pictures of her sleeping. Totally creepy things, terrifying. And there are a lot of things also further down the road in this movie that happen, which I'm not going to get into because spoiler territory, but they capture a lot of those really well. And just the fact that you just cannot feel certain as an audience, or like as Elizabeth Moss's character, you're feeling her emotions. You just feel the uncertainty and the psychological decay of her character. I thought that all those elements worked pretty well in this movie, and it was effective. I also thought that the music played really well into the movie as well. When it was loud, it was just trying to get you into this tight, tension-filled scene, and it worked. And then also where there are sometimes just these slow pans of the room, there's no music. It's just completely silent, and you're just scared out of your mind, holding your breath. Almost like, not quite A Quiet Place, but just that kind of on-edge feeling of not wanting to make a noise as you're trying to look for something or try to listen and hear for any sort of intruder. All of those elements worked really well, that sound design, and it just also played into the tension-filled themes of this movie, and I thought it worked. Also, when there are altercations with this Invisible Man in the movie, I thought that those scenes were handled pretty well. It's very interesting to think about how you can choreograph a fight with an invisible person. I don't really know exactly how they did it, if they just used wires. I doubt that. Or if they just used a full person, just kind of painted his body out in post. But whatever they did, it looked really good for the most part. And I thought that that was a really cool achievement for this movie. And as far as things that I thought that they could have done better in this movie were two things. One was the story and the plot, and then the other is the dialogue and how that is interwoven with the story and the plot. I thought the dialogue was just way too simple, too on the nose, and it didn't really have any sort of creativity in it. The most creative thing about this movie is just the whole concept of having an invisible person tormenting you, and that's incredibly creative. I thought it worked really well how they captured it. But then the dialogue around that was just way too simple. It was all just what you thought, like, well, yeah, like if someone was just kind of thinking about the story in general, someone who wasn't a talented writer at all would have written this dialogue with this creative concept. And that's just how I felt whenever I was hearing any of the lines. And then as far as the story goes, I thought that there was way too much exposition at the beginning of the movie. Granted, that's when you need to have most of your exposition pieces, but this movie is 2 hours long and change. I think that it could have been probably maybe an hour 45 minutes. They could have trimmed 20 minutes out of there, especially at the beginning of this movie. It just focuses for a long time on Elizabeth Moss's psychology and her kind of explaining her relationship to her sister and her friend that she's staying with. And I thought that it just took too much time. It was a little bit too boring, and it's not as effective as showing it. Granted, where this movie picks up, I actually liked that. I didn't really need to see their relationship before this movie started. I thought that it could have been a little bit more straightforward, maybe showing some scenes where she's kind of having flashbacks, a moment where he was abusive. That would have been effective, but just having her like tell someone, it's an effective thing to hear that, but it's not as effective as showing it, and that's something that you have free reign to do in a movie. And as far as the ending goes, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but with the dialogue at the very last scene, I thought that it just was very apparent that the writers thought they were being way more clever than they actually were. And my issue with the ending is something that also happened a couple times earlier in the film, where they have some sort of action that happens that is a big conflict, but then they kind of revisit that and kind of overdo it by adding some extra dialogue to confirm already what you saw as the audience. And I just think that they kind of overkill their points. Something happens that causes distress to Elizabeth Moss, and then later on, maybe like 10 minutes or 15 minutes down the road, they revisit that exact thing just to kind of confirm what happened. And I would have been a lot more happy or satisfied if they took out those confirmations and just kind of left it up in the air of like, you're uncertain. That's a lot freakier than just kind of like revealing your cards and saying like, no, this is actually what happened. That goes along with the end of the movie as well. I think that they could have done a lot of those sort of things better, along with the dialogue and the plot. Those two things, they could have finely tuned, maybe found like a little bit better of a script writer. Concept is great. They definitely got the tension right and the sort of psychological decay of Elizabeth Moss's character. But those two things, like I was saying, could have been done way better. The Invisible Man, it's passable.
Oh my God. I pass.
Thank you for stopping by and watching my review of The Invisible Man. If you could please consider pressing the subscribe button, you'll be notified of my new content. Also press the notification bell down below. Click all notifications, you'll be notified again of all of my new content. Or if you don't have a YouTube account or you just don't really want to subscribe, you can always follow me on Instagram. I don't flood everyone with, all of my reviews, but anytime that I'm releasing a new video, I just post a little reminder like, hey guys, come check out my review. So you can follow me on Instagram at Jared Gilster, and I will send you guys more reviews very soon once I see some new movies. So I'll see you guys later.